pidgin through Obolo, which was the best thing that could ever happen because it gave me another perspective completely on Creole languages. Because I learned, the first Creole language that I learned in my life was through an African language. So this was the gift that she gave me from the start. So I'm always grateful to her for that, but for so many other things as well. Because we have to understand what K. Williamson's generation represented in terms of African linguistics. We have to understand that up until 1960, you know, only 50 years ago, this was the classification of African languages. Okay, next one. Next one. That. Okay, this was the official scientific classification of African languages in 1960. This is what she was up against, okay? We were still going back to condemned tribes of Israel, Shem's tribe and Ham's tribe, and then of course, when you get, by the time you get to Sudanic, it's not even part of the nations of Israel, and then when you get to the bottom, of course, as John said yesterday, that's the bottom of the levels of very racialized groupings of languages. So this is what her generation came into linguistics facing. So if we can just go up one, please. Okay. So her contribution to this, okay, down. Yes, okay. So a member of her generation of Africanists was Greenberg. What Greenberg did in 1963 was he attempted to do a more scientific classification of African languages. But it was an uphill battle because these classifications were very much entrenched among people who studied African languages. And so he did a mass comparison of languages, as I explained yesterday in the mini course, and he put them into 5 families, Khoisan, Niger-Congo, Nilo-Saharan, Afro-Asiatic, and Austronesian. And among the most significant findings in that classification was, number one, that Bantu is a very recent offshoot of what became Benoit-Kwa. Okay, this is a very important thing for us. Okay, so this idea of Bantu languages is a very distinct group from other West African languages. This was already in the 1960s debunked, this idea, okay, this mythology. But also, within the Afro-Asiatic grouping, he put Semitic and Ancient Egyptian. This was also a major advance in linguistic classification, but it was one of the most ideologically charged things that he did, because how could Semitic and Ancient Egyptian belong to a family of languages, the great majority, the vast majority of which are spoken not just in northeastern Africa, but Central Africa and even West Africa and Nigeria itself. So that was a very controversial thing. Again, this was part of the uphill battle that her generation faced. And then finally, that Malgache is actually, as many of you know, more closely related to what's spoken in the area, in Malacca, okay, around Malacca, than it is to what's spoken across the sea in Mozambique, okay, which is another interesting. So you can make the next, yes. Okay, so here's his map. Okay, there's Malgache, and of course it's a family that stretches all the way not only to Southeast Asia, but also to Easter Island. Okay, so it goes from the coast of East Africa to the coast of this continent, the Pacific coast of this continent. Okay, I want to talk more about that. I just want to say a few words though about what she did in 2 areas. First, in the area of the classification of Afro-Asiatic, which is the blue area there, and then second in terms of Niger-Congo. Okay, one thing about Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. Okay, within Semitic you have Hebrew, Babylonian, Assyrian, Arabic, okay? And these are all within this one branch. Now, Chadic, which is spoken in northern Nigeria, is also an Afro-Asiatic language. And one of her generation, Newman, said if Chadic languages had been spoken by Semitic-looking peoples in oases in North Africa, their membership in Afro-Asiatic would have been settled long ago. But Chadic languages are spoken in sub-Saharan Africa by black people, and thus there has been a deep-seated resistance to this idea. And I can remember when I first presented some of these findings to a conference in Boston in 1983 or 4, something like that, based on K. Williamson's information, nobody would accept this. Nobody would accept this at all. But if you look at the distribution of Afroasiatic languages, you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 branches. Of the 6 branches, 5 are spoken totally in Africa, and the 6th, Semitic, consists of 9 groups and 15 languages. Of those 9 groups, 6 groups of the 9 are spoken in Africa, only 3 are spoken outside of Africa, and of the 15 languages that still exist in Semitic, 10 of them are spoken within Africa. Okay, so what's the logical conclusion? Probably the homeland for Afroasiatic is not going to be where a lot of linguists wanted it to be, which is somewhere in the Middle East, or at least somewhere outside of Africa, okay? It's somewhere inside of Africa. So basically, these are the types of challenges we're faced by her generation. Not only these racialized classifications at the macro level, but more at the level of different families in Africa. So basically, what she did was she looked at the configuration of languages here and applied the null hypothesis, which would normally be considered the way to calculate where these languages came from. Okay, so basically, languages in a particular group usually come from the area with the greatest diversity. Okay, so if you look at English, okay, the greatest diversity of English is found in the British Isles, because that's where they've had the longest time to differentiate. That's not a hard and fast principle, but that's one of the guidelines we use. And if there's no other factor that makes it different from other scenarios, that's the scenario which you follow. Secondly, the homeland is usually the area from which the boundaries of the subgroupings spread like spokes. So what she did was, next one. Yes, what she did was she just connected the groups and focused on this area. So in her work, based on her work, we concluded that the homeland for Afroasiatic would be in this particular area, which is the Darfur-Kordofan region. Okay, and after that, and then we can get to the next slide. Yes, okay. If you look at the climatic conditions in Africa, or West Africa, especially in the Sahara, you see there was a wet spell between 28,000 and 18,000 BC, and this corresponds to a time when there were lakes and rivers. The Sahara was green. Okay, but then from 18,000 to 10,000, there was a major dry spell, and people had to retreat into the areas where there would still be water. Okay, then from 10,000 to 5,000 BC, and from 5,000 to 3,000 BC, there were shorter wet and dry spells. In this period, people could move out of these restricted areas. Okay, so based on this, and which is corroborated by a lot of other climatic and archaeological evidence, another one. Okay, we see that there are 3 areas of the Sahara where you would have these wet conditions during this dry spell. One is the Darfur-Kordofan region, and it's yellow there. That would be the area that's proposed as the Afroasiatic homeland. Okay, then there's the Mega Chad. Lake Chad was not this little thing that we have today, it was a big thing. That is being proposed as the homeland for the Nilo-Saharan languages. And then the green area there is the inland delta of the Niger River. The Niger River has 2 deltas. One that I showed you before, which touches the sea, but there's another delta in Mali. Okay, and that's the green area there. And some put it a little further away from there, but somewhere in that area is one of the areas that would have remained wet during this period. So the 3 major language families of Africa probably had their homelands in these 3 places. Of course, when you get, okay, and also Percy Sutton has identified a complex of pottery and bone carving technologies that actually spread all the way across this area during this time. Some of the earliest pottery in the world actually comes from this area. Okay, also Kay was able to find in the literature evidence that showed that the habitats of animals traceable to Proto-Asiatic from all of the different branches. The only habitat that they would have been able to occupy during this time, the time we're talking about, is within this triangle, which does not include the Middle East in any case, but includes the Darfur-Kordofan region. This is the way that Kay Williamson put together evidence to prove her case. Okay, okay, so what happens? The dry phase is over, the wet phase begins, people start moving out of these pockets of wet conditions along the river courses. And if you trace the different branches of Afroasiatic, you can trace them right along these river courses. You trace Nilo-Saharan, you can trace it along the river courses, and also Niger-Congo. So why do we have an Atlantic branch, and a Gore branch, and a Kru branch, and a Benue-Ekwa branch? Because there were different rivers that people followed. Adamawa. Okay, so if you look at that, you get this initial expansion up until 5000 BC. Notice, Bantu is not there yet. Bantu is a much later expansion. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is what happens after that. After that, you get a further expansion. The ancient Egyptian speakers go up to reach the Nile Delta. Chadic speakers actually go and begin to herd cattle and go out of the river systems. Semitic speakers go north and east go out of Ethiopia and into the Arabian Peninsula. But in terms of Niger-Congo, basically this is when the Bantu expansion starts to happen, actually late during this period, probably at the earliest around 3000 AD to 2000 AD. Okay, so there's the Bantu expansion. What allows this expansion to happen? Okay, this particular area of Africa is one of the densest forests. And what happened is that the Bantu speakers brought new iron smelting technologies which gave them the ability to cut the bush. And also a very powerful agricultural complex which was yams and palm oil. Again, she's the one who put all of this data together. And they spread, and of course, we had this expansion that happens all the way across East Africa, into East Africa, Central Africa, and all the way down to Southern Africa. But it's very, very recent, which means that the people in the languages in Nigeria and Togo, Benin, and Ghana, including what before was considered Kwa and now is considered Kwa, are very, 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 very closely related to Bantu. So this idea that Bantu is one planet and Kwa is another planet is a myth, a big myth that we're still living down. But just as she had to live down the racial classification of languages and the idea that Semitic must have been more somewhere outside of Africa, we're still living it down because this is just, people don't do it consciously, they just reproduce what's in the books. And in the books you have all of these people using Kwa in a very archaic manner and using Benue Congo in a very archaic, or Bantu in a very archaic manner. Okay, so basically, Greenberg actually, because of received wisdom, decided to keep Kwa separate from Benue Congo using in 1963. But this is probably the only part of his classification that he himself doubted. He himself expressed doubts about this division. And what K. Williamson did, along with DeVolf, Stewart, Bennett, and Stepp, they formed a Benue Congo study group, a working group of people who do language classification. And in fact, what they found was that actually the first finding was that Yoruba, Igbo, Edo, all of those languages that used to be part of Kwa from Greenberg's classification are much more closely related to Benue Congo, much more closely related to Bantu languages than Kwa, than what's spoken in Ghana. Okay, so if you do want to make this division, you got to throw Yoruba, Igbo, and Edo out of Kwa and put them into Benue Congo if you want to maintain that division. But in the end, they realized you could not even maintain that division. There's no convincing evidence linguistically to separate Kwa from Benue Congo, and in the end, they just put it into one sub-branch, which is Benue Kwa. Now, what's the implication of that? Well, all of the languages spoken on the coast of West Africa, from Ghana to Angola, except for the Ijo languages in the Niger Delta, which she studied actually, belong to the same sub-branch of the same branch of Niger-Congo. Okay. Well, that's the implication of that. Okay, so in other words, all the way from the new Kwa, which is just restricted to